We got a good one for you today. It is a live mock draft episode of the Fantasy Football Show on radio.com sports. And not only that, all three of us are going to deploy a different draft strategy to give you an idea of what works best for you. My name is Steven Andrus, joined alongside of Jesse Pantusco and Jordan Cohn from the radio.com sports staff. And in this draft, I'm going to be picking from the second spot in a 12-team PPR with a traditional strategy of taking the best player available. Jordan Cohn will be in the 8th spot, deploying a 0 RB strategy. And then Jesse Pantusco will be in the 9th spot, deploying an RB heavy strategy. What that means is Jordan is not going to select a running back until the 7th round in this 8-round mock draft. And then Jesse is going to deploy in his RB heavy 3 consecutive running back picks in the first 3 rounds, and then going anything but running back for the rest of the draft. So let's get it started here on the radio.com sports fantasy football show. All right, let's get this thing started. The only other rule we have, despite the fact that I'm wearing a Ray Finkel t-shirt jersey, no kickers allowed in this mock draft, Jordan and Jesse. 0 kickers in this 8-round mock draft. I am on the clock with the second pick. Ezekiel Elliott has gone number 1. Sometimes you get some weird auto picks here in this draft. Usually I would expect Christian McCaffrey to go number 1 in every single draft, but with a computer picking, you never know. Let's imagine that Christian McCaffrey went with the first overall pick. In this one, Ezekiel Elliott went second, but I would still take this guy, number 2 overall on my board. To me, it's Saquon Barkley, has the highest volume available, has the pass-catching chops, nobody there to take away his touches whatsoever. For me, it is a clear 1, 2, 3 at the top of drafts. Christian McCaffrey, then Saquon Barkley, and then Ezekiel Elliott. So I am locking in my pick right now, Saquon Barkley at the 1.02, assuming that most drafts will have Christian McCaffrey going first overall. So now that puts Jordan on the clock in a 0 RB strategy at pick 1.08.
Yeah, and you'll see that the top 3 guys on the board right now are Joe Mixon, Kenyan Drake, and Josh Jacobs. Not my board per se, but on the sleeper app board that we're using. Michael Thomas is gone, and that's pretty much a given in any draft. He's not going to be there around pick 8. So I have a couple options here, and I think that the most important thing when you're going 0 RB is to get high floor guys the whole entire way, because you know that you're going to get points from them. You need to get points from them. Wait until your running backs to go for risky. So there's Tyreek Hill, there's Devontae Adams, there's Julio Jones as my 3 top candidates. I'm going to go with Tyreek Hill here. He's produced every year for Pat Mahomes. He's healthy. The Chiefs' offense isn't going anywhere. It's probably going to be better with Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
I feel bad for Jordan because I think running back heavy is really the way to go this year. I can't imagine what's going to be left for him in the 7th round. I got a few good options here. I'm probably going to pick between Joe Mixon and Kenyan Drake, probably leaning Drake. He was, for really the first time in his career, saw workhorse usage after he was traded from Miami to Arizona last year, started over David Johnson, and was excellent. And I think that's really important that he has not, even in college at Alabama, he was 2nd and 3rd string. So he doesn't have I know he's already 26, but he doesn't have the mileage of those other workhorse backs like Derrick Henry, where you worry about fatigue, especially after Henry saw 400 touches last year, including the playoffs. I like Chase Edmonds too, and I think he's a good handcuff, but I'm going to go the chalk here with Kenyan Drake.
So that's going to put the snake back around here with the 10th, 11th, and 12th spots. Went Josh Jacobs, Joe Mixon, Julio Jones, then Nick Chubb, Aaron Jones, Devontae Adams finally off the board. Latest I've seen him. So a bit of a weird mock draft here. But Jesse, you're back on the clock here with your RB heavy approach.
Yeah, I got a few options here. The top 3 in the sleeper queue that we're using are Miles Sanders, Austin Eckler, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think it's a little early for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Rookie out of LSU for Kansas City. It's a good offense and probably a good opportunity to score. But I think I'm probably going to end up picking between Sanders and Eckler. But I'm going to go with Miles Sanders, who should have the workhorse role in Philadelphia, was excellent down the stretch in his rookie season. No longer has Jordan Howard to compete with there. And I think Philadelphia's offense is going to have more scoring opportunities with a little injury luck this year. They added some receiving talent with Jalen Reagor, added some speed on the outside with Marquise Goodwin. We'll see if Deshaun Jackson and Alshon Jeffrey are healthy this year. Obviously, they have two excellent tight ends, so it should be a high-scoring offense, a lot of touchdown opportunities. I'm going to take Sanders.
Jesse and Jordan, I like that you're picking right next to each other here, because then you can see easily what the two different strategies will look like basically from the same spot. Now, Jordan, who's the best available wide receiver for you now, or maybe not even, maybe a tight end here in your zero running back strategy?
Well, yeah, the two obvious choices here are DeAndre Hopkins and Travis Kelce. Hopkins rounding out the last of that elite tier of 5 wide receivers of Michael Thomas, Tyreek Hill, Julio Jones, and Devontae Adams. And I think that drafting from the 8 or beyond is ideally where you want to go if you're going zero running back, because before that, you'd obviously be passing up on a no-brainer top-tier running back, which is just such an elusive commodity, especially in 2020. It's fairly top-heavy. I think that DeAndre Hopkins is the pick that I'm going to roll with here. Tight end, to me, is a sneakily deep position, and I also don't love having both Kelce and Tyreek Hill on the same roster. Not that they're not both going to produce, but I really like Hopkins, and I think that he is on that tier above other options that I'll find in this draft. Whereas, honestly, I think Kelce is on a wider tier than people may think.
After the DeAndre Hopkins pick, we have Kelce, Mahomes off the board, Austin Eckler, Chris Godwin, and Mike Evans. I would have been tempted by one of those names if they were there. So right now I'm looking at the best available running backs of Clyde Edwards-Helaire or Todd Gurley. That's a big reach to me in the second round. Among wide receivers, Kenny Golladay, Adam Thielen, Allen Robinson. I just think wide receiver is so deep that I can pass on one here and take the other elite tight end this season in George Kittle from my San Francisco 49ers with Deebo Samuel hurt. I think Kittle has a potential 120 target season coming here to put him among the elite tight ends to give me a huge position advantage over most other teams in a fantasy football league. So for me, this is a no-brainer. I'm taking George Kittle at the back end of the second round. After that, in the one spot, Clyde Edwards-Helaire went. Todd Gurley went as well. I'm going to pass on Lamar Jackson here, stick with the later round quarterback strategy, and I'm looking at wide receiver. And I think Kenny Golladay for me is a clear tier above guys like Adam Thielen and Juju Smith-Schuster, Odell Beckham even. So the only other guy I'd consider here maybe with Kenny Golladay is Allen Robinson of the Chicago Bears. But when you see how many pass attempts Matthew Stafford was on pace for, when you saw how many touchdowns he was on pace for after getting hurt halfway through the season, I love the upside of Kenny Golladay in this Detroit offense with a Lions defense that should be awful this season. So I think there might be a high volume situation in Detroit, similar to what we saw with Jameis Winston in the Tampa Bay Bucks a year ago. So I'm going to lock in my pick of Kenny Golladay here in the third round as we move on now to pick 3.08 and Jordan.
I might go down a little bit farther than might be expected of me based on the draft board. Adam Thielen is the top guy right now. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't love him being the sole guy without Stephon Diggs around. It'll probably up his target share, but I also think the defenses were naturally inclined to defend both of them, pay a lot of attention to both of them. There's Odell Beckham available. There's Amari Cooper available. A guy that's catching my eye is DJ Moore. I think that he's going to be a receptions hog this year, and I think that Robbie Anderson's addition is not going to take away from him, but to help stretch the field, whereas Moore is really an underneath specialist. And, in a PPR format, I don't know if there's a high floor pick like Moore that I could go with here. So that's going to be my pick. A little bit of a reach, but I think that in terms of stability and good PPR production, DJ Moore is about as good as it gets.
All right, Jesse, RB heavy. Who are you looking at here in round 3?
So I guess I'm really choosing between, kind of the best of a few bad options. David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell, and Chris Carson. Really want no part of Le'Veon Bell. Doesn't seem like Adam Gase believes in him or ever wanted him. And he's got Frank Gore as sort of a goal line competition there. Chris Carson is one of those like sneaky good guys. Always seems to go for over 1,000 yards, but he's coming off injury. He had hip surgery at the end of last season, and that's going to be could be a timeshare system as well. They added Carlos Hyde this offseason, and they have a rookie DJ Dallas and Rashad Penny if he comes back from his ACL injury. So there's just a lot of mouths to feed there, a lot of uncertainty. I don't love this pick, but I'm still required by law to go with a running back here. So I will give the slight nod to David Johnson, who should be in for a workhorse role in Houston. It's a pretty good offense. I think David Johnson has always been a solid receiver, so I think he'll get some good PPR usage. No Carlos Hyde or Lamar Miller, who was not signed in free agency. So, as sort of a last-ditch RB2, I guess David Johnson's probably the best we can get here, just based on his volume and role.
All right, Jesse, back on the clock here with the fourth pick in round 4 after taking the correct D. Johnson.
Yeah, I think this worked out swimmingly for me because I'm looking at Juju Smith-Schuster as the top wide receiver available, and I'm 100% going to pick him. I think, when drafts sort of started popping up, last month, you could probably get a little bit of a better bargain for Juju, where he's going in maybe like the 5th round or something. This is still, I think, really great value for a guy who is coming off a down season, but was electric before that. He actually, in 2018, outproduced his teammate Antonio Brown in terms of receiving yards with over 1,400, and he was only 22 at the time. So, had some injury hiccups last year, suffered from poor quarterback play with Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges. Ben Roethlisberger should be back ready to go, and he threw for over 5,000 yards the last time he was healthy. So I really like Juju Smith-Schuster, who I believe is also in a contract year, so he has something to play for too, to have a bounce back year, and really, couldn't be happier to get him as my wide receiver 1 after going running back heavy the first 3 rounds.
Did you get sniped, Jordan, or is your guy still there?
My guy is still there, I have to say. And it's not Amari Cooper who's next, nor is it Cooper Kupp, nor is it Mark Andrews, who's the top tight end on the board. I'm going to take a gamble here. I'm going to go with Calvin Ridley of the Falcons. I think that I'm getting 4 bona fide wide receiver 1s here. Who knows if they'll be trade bait? Who knows if one is going to get injured? I can seamlessly replace another one. I can play the matchups. I really like Ridley this year. I think he's going to exceed expectations, as I know one of you does as well. And so he is going to be my selection in the 4th round.
I agree with you that Ridley is a top 12 receiver in fantasy, thus potentially a wide receiver 1. They really only have Ridley, Julio Jones, and a bunch of newcomers there to eat up those targets. So I'm on the clock here in round 4. I can kind of go a multitude of different directions here after starting with a running back, tight end, and wide receiver. For me, I'm looking at the top available running backs. We're looking at a rookie in Cam Akers from the Rams who, Sean McVay just said they might have a 4-man committee a couple of days ago. I'm looking at wide receiver. I love what's available. I'm looking at names like Robert Woods and A.J. Brown of the Tennessee Titans. Robert Woods had some bad touchdown luck a year ago, had less than 5 touchdowns on a ton of targets. Brandon Cooks is gone from there. I do love A.J. Brown with how good he was at the end of last season. He was just so monstrous and explosive, but I'm projecting Ryan Tannehill to have less than 450 pass attempts this year, which means that A.J. Brown still has to stay extremely efficient to keep up the production he had at the end of last year. Whereas Jared Goff, I think, with a defense that isn't as good this season, I think that we're looking at a quarterback who could approach close to 600 passing attempts. And with Brandon Cooks gone, I'm going to take Robert Woods here. And even if Cooper Kupp was still on the board, I'd still consider taking Robert Woods ahead of Cooper Kupp. I just think the positive touchdown regression is coming for Robert Woods. All right, back on the clock here in round 5 after DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett go off the board. And the pick's easy for me now. A.J. Brown is still there. I already have a tight end. I still am going to wait for a running back here. I think I can find some good plug-and-play RB2s and just kind of do that by committee with my later picks. And I got to take A.J. Brown here with just the monstrous upside that he had at the end of last season. As my wide receiver 3 instead of my wide receiver 2, I have a hard time not locking in that pick. So I'm going to run to the podium here and take A.J. Brown with my 5th pick, my wide receiver 3. And a huge run on wide receivers now after that. Let's see if Jordan's going to stick with the wide receivers in a 0 RB strategy. The next pick's Cam Akers, T.Y. Hilton, Keenan Allen, Terry McLaurin, who would have been my other pick if A.J. Brown was gone. DJ Chark off the board as well. Where does Jordan go to now?
I am not going to stick on the wide receiver train. I was hoping that someone like Ertz would fall to me here in the 5th round, and he did. I really like Ertz. There's going to be a lot of inconsistency and moving parts in this Eagles offense. Who knows what Alshon Jeffrey is going to look like? Who knows what Deshaun Jackson's punishment is going to be? You know, Jalen Reagor might take some time to get into the system. There's going to be potentially a running back shakeup. I like Ertz and Goddard this year, but Ertz is obviously the primary threat in that offense. Now I'm going to take him in the 5th round. Very happy with that.
Jesse, I'm curious what you think about that and where you're going to go now that the top 4 elite tight ends are off the board.
At this point, I think all the tight ends would really be reaches. So I am going to look at wide receiver, which is tough too, because we just had a huge run on those. Would have loved any of Chark, McLaurin, or Keenan Allen, who I think are good values at this stage. I guess I'll probably go with Courtland Sutton coming off a 1,000-yard season and might benefit from the addition of Jerry Jeudy, so he's not facing double teams all the time, may have a little more breathing room downfield. He showed good chemistry with Drew Lock, who's went 4-1 down the stretch. Really like him as a Ben Roethlisberger type downfield gunslinger. So I think he's a good match with Sutton. And as a back end wide receiver too, I'm totally fine with this pick.
We snake back around here. Kyler Murray, the 3rd quarterback off the board after that Courtland Sutton pick. Diggs, Kareem Hunt, Darren Waller, the rookie DeAndre Swift, Raheem Mostert off the board, and now Jesse back on the clock.
I'm going to pull a little bit of an audible here because I just assumed I was probably going to take 3 wide receivers after going running back the first few rounds. But I there's still a lot of good wide receiver 3s that I like that I think I can get later. I mean, we'll see if I'm right. And I just, I don't think tight end's a very deep position and don't want to be pigeonholed into, reaching for a guy like Higbee or Hunter Henry or somebody like that. So I'm going to go Evan Engram here. He's really more of a receiver than a tight end, sort of a smaller tight end, and has always produced when healthy. That's, the big if with Evan Engram. It's a deep pass catching group. I think the Giants have some low key, a lot of fantasy potential. Golden Tate's a guy you can get later in drafts. Sterling Shepard, even Darius Slayton was among the rookie leaders in touchdown receptions last year.
All right, Jordan, you're on the clock. Running back is getting thin here, but we made the rule that you can't take one until the 7th round in this RB0 strategy. So now what?
It really is getting thin, and even if I could take one here, I might as well wait. I do not like the guys that are available on the board right now. I was hoping that someone like Kareem Hunt might drop into that 7th round. Probably a little bit too auspicious on my part. I'm going to break from my philosophy a little bit here, and I'm going to draft a quarterback. I'm going to go with Russell Wilson right here in the 6th round. Again, consistency, high floor. He shoulders the load for this team. He's really found his chemistry with both Lockett and Metcalf. And so I'm going to go with the vet here in the 6th.
And I was curious if, when I came on the clock, if Dak Prescott would be there, and he is. Again, I think in a lot of drafts, you're going to see Dak Prescott as the 3rd quarterback off the board. And now we have 5 quarterbacks taken, and he's still sitting there. And I don't think there's anything that's going to deter from him being a top 5 fantasy quarterback again this season. But with my personal draft strategy, I still don't like taking a quarterback this early unless it's a Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson, as you guys have seen in most drafts, they aren't going to slip past the 4th round, even in expert leagues. So I just can't go quarterback here yet. I'm going to hope for maybe a potential stack with one of my receivers that I have already later in this draft. So I'm looking at running back or wide receiver right here. Like Jordan said, I don't like the value among the running backs here in the 6th round either. You're looking at a lot of part-time, timeshare running backs. So I'm going to, again, target the value at wide receiver in this round. I was hoping for Marquise Hollywood Brown to come back to me here. It didn't happen, so I got to call an audible. And I just see a guy here who year in, year out, drops in drafts farther than he should, seems to be a value every single season in fantasy drafts, despite putting up consistent numbers and high target floors. And I know he had hip surgery in the offseason, but I think Jarvis Landry at the back end of the 6th round here is a solid value and this is the important part, in full PPR leagues. So I like Jarvis Landry here as my wide receiver 4. I think it's at least 120 targets in that offense for him, even with a healthy Odell Beckham. As a plug-and-play potential flex or a wide receiver 4 as a backup, I love that. So after that, A.J. Green and Dak Prescott off the board. I'm back on the clock. I think at this point I better start looking for my running back 2 before I let it slip any further. There's been a lot of love recently for Damian Williams of the Kansas City Chiefs. I understand the logic behind it. I do think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is being overdrafted in the 2nd round. I think you're drafting him at his ceiling. I do understand that first-round running backs get a decent amount of work over the years. The history has shown us that. And Damian Williams has been an injury risk. But at this point, in an elite offense, when the other options we're looking at are a James White with a new quarterback, a J.K. Dobbins, who might be in his own 4-man timeshare, Tevin Coleman, who at this point is still sharing work with Raheem Mostert. I have to take Damian Williams here for the upside and hope that at least in the early going, he's going to be the one that gets, at least 50% of the touches in that backfield, maybe more, with Clyde Edwards-Helaire not having a traditional offseason to get accustomed to the offense. So Damian Williams is my pick. And now, Jordan, if you want, you are free to take a running back in your 0 RB strategy.
Yeah, and I think I would be mistaken if I didn't go with one here. I'm not too thrilled with the options. Again, a guy like Tevin Coleman, that is not the high ceiling player that you want to draft if you're going with a 0 RB strategy. You want to take high risk, high reward guys at this point because your floor isn't going to be all that exciting. I'd rather draft, a slew of running backs toward the back end that would really help, find one diamond in the rough and your draft strategy could really pay off big time. That guy for me is going to be Derrius Guice. He's dealt with a lot of injuries, but I think that, when he has been healthy, he's shown his dynamic and explosive offensive talent. He ripped off a few really nice runs last season. He has potential as a receiver. I think his projection of 30 receptions might be a bit high, but without Chris Thompson in the fold anymore and with an aging AP, I could definitely see that being a realistic number. So I'm going to go with Guice.
All right, Jesse, you are on the clock, and you could go many different directions here after starting out with 3 running backs.
Yeah, I'm still not ready to take a quarterback, so I think I'm probably going to zero in on a receiver since I went Engram last round. And I got some interesting choices. You talk about Michael Gallup coming off a 1,000-yard season in his 2nd year with Dallas. You know what? I think I'm going to go with Will Fuller, actually. I think that a lot of the sharps are on him. He should be the number 2 receiver behind Brandon Cooks in Houston with DeAndre Hopkins.
Could be number 1. Could be Texans number 1.
Yeah, could be with especially the short off season and Brandon Cook's injury history with concussions. Fuller is always awesome when he's healthy. I don't think he's ever come close to playing a full 16-game season. Contract year for him. Still has elite speed. As a wide receiver 3, why not, right?
Yeah, I don't mind it at all. So we're snaking back around here. This will be the last round of our mock draft. Next week, we'll continue this draft with more sleeper potential options in rounds 9 through 13. But let's wrap things up here. The 8th round here of this mock draft. Jesse, back on the clock.
I think I might go back to wide receiver. Tyler Boyd is coming off a couple 1,000-yard seasons in a row. I think A.J. Green's a little bit of an unknown. He's never played with Joe Burrow, obviously, and didn't play at all last year with his ankle injury, and is sort of getting up there into his 30s. So I think Tyler Boyd's sort of that consistent slot receiver. There are a lot of moving parts, and I think the Bengals are going to be an improved offense for fantasy purposes this year, in their second year. So I think Boyd's a good volume bet. Good, so it has a safe floor as sort of that easy slot receiver target. We saw Joe Burrow throw to Justin Jefferson as a slot receiver at LSU. I think he led the nation in catches last year. So obviously the slot is an important position to him. And I just think he's the best option out of what I'm seeing at wide receiver. There's still some good options available. You got Marvin Jones, Jamison Crowder, and other guys who might get good volume. But I think 8th round's probably good value for Boyd here.
No, I don't mind that pick at all. Boyd was a wide receiver 2 last year without A.J. Green. The year before, he was a wide receiver 2 with A.J. Green, with terrible quarterback play in both of those seasons. And I think Joe Burrow is only an improvement on that quarterback play in 2020. So, Jordan, 8th round. Where are you going?
Yeah, so this is my issue with having taken someone like Ertz in the 5th, which I still think is good value. But now I'm seeing that Higbee and Hurst are available in the 8th. I think both of those are very, very good values. Would probably be my pick here had I gone a different direction earlier on. But I'm going to go with another running back, another guy whose ceiling really is unknown. We've heard Bruce Arians hype up Ronald Jones a lot, saying that he's everything that the team was looking for. But they also spent a pretty high pick on Keyshawn Vaughn. And with a Brady-led offense with great receivers with Gronk in town, the Bucs are probably going to be about as explosive a team as you can find, and that's what I'm hoping for here in taking Vaughn. And now I have 2 guys who could become their team's running back ones, one with a much better offense than the other, but both of them with a lot of untapped potential.
With Keyshawn Vaughn off the board, the last of what I see of a potential RB1 for their team. So for me, I'm just looking sheer upside here. Do I want to take a quarterback when I think all of these guys, Aaron Rodgers, Josh Allen, Carson Wentz, Matthew Stafford, they're all in the same tier for me. So in a normal snake draft, I'm trying to get guys at the bottom of the same tier to try and get some value. So I think I'm going to take Tarik Cohen here. Damian Williams right now is my RB2. I need more than that. I think Tarik Cohen at least gives me a floor in a full PPR. He has a history as an RB2 in fantasy in a full PPR. And the Bears vacated some targets from a year ago as well with Taylor Gabriel gone. We know that David Montgomery is not going to be a huge pass catcher, so I can see them both being on the field at the same time. So I'm going to take Tarik Cohen. And before we wrap things up here, let's kind of look at our teams. You can't pick your own team as having the best draft. So, Jordan, let's start with you. How did you like how your 0 RB strategy played out? And would you have preferred Jesse's heavy RB strategy now after looking at how it played out?
Honestly, I think that if you're drafting 8 through 12, 0 RB is a viable strategy this year. It's not if you're in the first half, and it's probably not going to be the best option regardless, as opposed to the best available approach. But in looking at my team, I think that I have 4 definite wide receiver 1 candidates. I have one of the top 5 tight ends. I have one of the top 5 quarterbacks. And then I have 2 high upside running backs. They could bust or they could go off. And I didn't really use a lot of value on them. Going wide receiver heavy or 0 RB also gives you some trade candidate potential. It gives you some matchup flexibility. Honestly, I'm not too upset with how it worked out. But overall, I think that, Steven, your team is the one that I would like the most. Obviously you could have gone with CMC there at the 2 slot in this somewhat odd mock draft, but
yeah, we're just going to assume that he's usually the first guy off the board.
Right. And I mean, Barkley at 2 is the right call. You got the best tight end in the game, I think. I would prefer Kittle over Kelsey this season. You have honestly 4 wide receivers who have high floors and, pretty moderate ceilings. I think that your play it straight strategy was the one that worked out best here.
And Jesse, same question to you as we wrap things up here. Looking back, would you have gone with the RB heavy strategy again, or do you prefer the 0 RB of Jordan right next to you?
I definitely don't prefer 0 RB. I might have gone 2 running backs instead of 3 at the jump, but it seems like a lot of the sharp fantasy players are loading up on running backs early because it really thins out once you get to the back end of the RB2 spectrum. And I'm really happy that I was able to snag both Drake and Sanders, who are, both, in my opinion, probably top 10 caliber running backs in fantasy based on their role and projected volume and scoring opportunity and what I think are upper tier offenses. I didn't love David Johnson as my RB3 there. That's probably about where he's going. He's not a horrible lottery ticket, though, again, based on projected role as the goal line finisher in Houston, replacing Carlos Hyde. I was really happy to get Juju Smith-Schuster in round 4. I feel like his ADP is on the rise. I don't know if I'll be able to swing that when I'm in my home leagues drafting in another month, because I think smart people are starting to catch on that Juju Smith-Schuster is really a top 10 receiver who's, based off last season, is available as a wide receiver too. The rest of the draft, I was, kind of so-so about. I've been trying to load up. I'm happy I got Will Fuller. I've have shares of him in almost every draft I've done so far. I don't have like a great tight end strategy. I've been going early at tight end when I can with guys like Kittle and Kelsey and Mark Andrews, who I think is a solid tight end 3 over Zach Ertz this year, as opposed to last year where he probably would have taken Ertz before him. But I'm fine with Engram where I got him, and I'm glad I didn't reach for a quarterback either. I think there's still a lot of good ones available in rounds 9 through 12 with Josh Allen, a guy who should have improved passing numbers this year with the addition of a go-to receiver and Stephon Diggs, and I believe leads the quarterback position in rushing touchdowns over the last 2 years, even ahead of Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, looking back now, if this was a best ball, I would have no problem in going with Jordan's 0 RB strategy, where you're just going to get the highest scoring running back on your roster every week, no matter what. You don't have to set a lineup. But in a traditional league where we have to make lineup decisions every week, I just have a hard time going with that 0 RB strategy. And I would much prefer the heavy RB strategy to that. But looking back, without even going into the draft with this plan, my kind of picks turned into a modified 0 RB, as everybody seems to be calling it this draft season, where you load up on a bona fide bell cow in the first round and then wait on your RB2 and do that by committee. Even if I didn't get George Kittle in the second round and got some more elite wide receivers there, maybe even mixed in potentially a Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson if available, I have a hard time not liking this strategy and then just going with some satellite backs in a full, and that's the key here. I like this in a full PPR. If it's a standard or a half PPR, I have a problem finding RB2s later who are going to give me some consistency if I'm not getting a full point per reception. So those satellite backs become more valuable in a full PPR deeper in drafts like a Damian Williams or Tarik Cohen. I wouldn't like this as much at all if it was a standard league. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us on this episode of the Radio.com Sports Fantasy Football Show. We are going to continue this draft in our next episode for rounds 9 through 13 to give you an idea of some diamonds in the rough, some sleepers to consider, with the given that we are sticking with the picks that we made in this episode. So we'll see you next time for that. For Jordan Cohn, for Jesse Pantusco, I'm Steven Andress. See you next time.